Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of OpsCast brought to you by marketingops.com, powered by all the Mopros out there. I'm your host, Michael Hartmann, flying solo. Mike and Naomi should be able to come back at some point. All right. Today, I'm going to be talking about what it really takes to build demand generation and revenue marketing capability inside a massive enterprise organization, especially when that tech stack is outdated, ownership is fragmented, and change has to happen without direct authority. Joining me to do that is my guest, Rachel Roundy, product marketing lead for AI at Snowflake. Prior to Snowflake, Rachel spent over 4 years inside a large legacy tech organization where she helped lead a cross-functional tiger team. I love that term. Tasked with building demand gen and revenue marketing muscle at scale. So the episode is going to be all about enterprise reality. So even if you're not in that, I suggest you listen. There's probably lessons to learn if you're scaling. The gap between strategy and execution, what happens when marketing and ops aren't aligned, lessons learned, and the ones you only learn when you're trying to drive change inside a company that's been operating the same way for years. Rachel, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael. That was a great intro. I love it.
Yeah. It's funny. I love that term tiger team. I use that myself. And it's funny when people kind of go cock their head, like, what? I have to explain it, but I get it. Maybe it's
Yeah,
a big company term. I don't know.
I think so. But it's like really descriptive. I think it's like, okay, we're kind of like assembled outside of, the usual structure to get something done together.
Right. It's the way they sort of let some people break out of the bureaucracy
Exactly.
capture, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, why don't we start with a little bit of your background? I think you've been, I don't remember how long it's been that you've been at Snowflake. I know it's been less than a year if I remember right.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe walk us through a career path. How'd you end up at Snowflake doing AI product stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I've only been here for a little over 2 months now, which is bananas because it feels like it's been a year, but in some ways, but also like a blip of time in others. But it's a really exciting place to be. I in my current role is in the product marketing function for our AI and marketing, or excuse me, AI and ML portfolio. So across all of the offerings that we have for that on top of the Snowflake platform. And it's fun to be back in product marketing. In my previous role, I was at Intel for 4.5 years, and I was doing kind of a hodgepodge of roles, doing integrated marketing, product marketing, and then most recently demand and ABM, which we'll talk about today. But I find it really fun to have a little bit of a flavor of each one of those roles. And there's a lot of connective tissue. My role here at Snowflake is really focused on kind of like building that holistic storytelling around how we're talking about our AI and ML offerings, really helping some of our audiences overcome their fear, uncertainty, and doubt around AI. And we were doing a lot of the same thing at Intel, honestly,
Yeah.
with our campaigns, with our AI PC and some of our enterprise AI offerings. And both roles, I get to work really closely with sales, with enablement, and with the demand and ABM team. So it's fun. I like any opportunity where I get to just kind of form a coalition across orgs and make some cool stuff happen. So yeah.
Yeah. It's funny that you describe it that way. So pull back the kimono a little bit, right before we started hitting record, we talked for 10 minutes about this idea of having broad generalist knowledge and understanding. I
Yes.
guess I don't even like the term T-shaped because I feel like it misses it, because I feel like I'm more than T-shaped. I feel like I'm generalist, maybe it's, um, I don't know, M-shaped, or I feel like there's multiple
Yeah.
domains where I go fairly deep.
Yeah.
But I think there's
That's
some
fair.
value in there.
I
Yeah.
think there's a ton of value in there. I mean, we were talking about it before, but I think, you know, a lot of folks and the job market has been this way for, I don't know, let's say more than a decade, where everyone's encouraged to become a deep specialist, and that
Yeah.
is kind of, you pick a lane and then you stay in that lane, and that's where your promotion cycle is, and that's how you kind of evolve. And it's gotten to a point too where it's so hyper specific. It's not only like, I'm a product marketer, but I'm a product marketer for this exact type of technology in this
Yeah.
exact vertical, and otherwise I can't branch out of that. But there's so much value in being able to zoom out and see the whole system and how your inputs are affecting everything else, end to end. And I think more companies are starting to see that. Like, you see now I know job postings are not quite catching up, but you see a lot of thought leaders talking about generalist marketing. And I think, we talked about this before too, but AI is forcing this
Yeah.
this as well, because you have to have this really tight collaboration between teams, between your data, between your operations and processes, if you're going to scale agentic systems within your org.
Right.
And I'm not talking about like customer facing agentic systems, but
Like internal
internally.
process stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. How are you streamlining? And the first place that that always falls apart is with your data and structure, right? And can you actually go tell an agent to do something that's going to require touching the processes of several teams? In most orgs, not yet, not even close, right? And so that's where the value really comes in, of understanding that end-to-end journey. And I can tell you, like, as a product marketer who has also done demand and ABM and also campaign stuff, every single person that I've met on those teams at Snowflake is like, oh, thank God you understand what my job is. Even our MOPS team, right? Like, especially them, I think, just because they're always somehow not as respected, or their value isn't as apparent, even though it is critical for literally anything to get done in marketing.
Right.
But yeah, it's I think it's really satisfying, and you just see magic happen when you're able to kind of connect those dots cross functionally, which is really relevant to this Tiger Team that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Well, so that's the Tiger Team. I think you hinted at, like, so I think I was going to say a very large enterprise organization. Maybe you say who it is. I think you already
Yeah,
did, but
it's okay. It's okay to
yeah.
say. Yeah.
Okay. So those Intel, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, when you first stepped into there, like, how would you describe that environment?
When I first joined, I mean, I would say in general, Intel is just a fascinating place that I don't know if it's like any other place I've ever worked or will work, in that it is massive, right? So we had like 100,000 plus employees.
Yeah.
We had global impact. We're talking, tens of billions of dollars per year in revenue, and it's a tech dinosaur. So, like, there were a lot of things about the organization that were very siloed, and it was very spread out. And at the same time, there were specific teams that had just an immense amount of scope. So as an example, the team that I was on for most of my time at Intel, we drove the strategy for 11 markets. And our director was pretty much a CMO of like the entire commercial client offering, right? And so we had everything end to end just within our small team for a global presence. We're talking millions and millions in budget, the support with like an 80-20 kind of balance between HQ creating 80% of the strategy and inputs and everything, and then sending that to the edge where they would personalize and execute that last 20%. So it was wild. It was really fun. I got to work with some of the coolest, most interesting humans. I loved talking to the global teams. That was my favorite part. Like, I'm very nerdy and have lived abroad for a long time. So like, I loved that the most. But the complexity that it introduces is absolutely bananas. So like, if you imagine just like a nurture program, and say you've got like 6 languages, and within that nurture program, you've got, a fairly mature modular kind of setup, right? So maybe you've got something always on. For us, as an example, we had like an always on monthly newsletter, and then we had these different nurture tracks that people would go down. And they would get opted into that based on different behaviors or scoring models. And at some point there would be an option to raise your hand, right? There was all these kind of this really thoughtful logic in it. But every single one of those needed to be built out for every different language. And not only every different language, but also each country that was using those languages. So we would have like French Canadian and then like French. Yeah. That's just the basic bare bones, right? Of like the number of assets you've got in there. Now introduce A/B testing. What do you like? And so at any given point, you've got like 50 versions of a single email send, because you're testing different things. You've got all these different A/B variants in all these different languages. So then you imagine trying to pull a report on like, how did this newsletter from February perform? Well, that is not as simple as just going to query one email. It is literally aggregating all of them. And what we ran into that was a constant battle that we were really getting much more streamlined in at the end was like simple things that are like paper cuts that end up making things really hard, like naming conventions. Yes. Nobody would follow them, right, at all. And so then if those 50 emails that you've got, our teams have to go manually track down each individual send. there'd also be delays because of localization. So Japan would
Yeah.
maybe not actually send that one until a month after the US had sent it. So good
I
luck
mean,
finding that ops to go find which
yeah.
one matches to the, so
Yeah. And
it,
so one of the things that I'm sure there's research on this somewhere, but um, it's interesting what I've seen having worked at maybe not quite as big an organization as what you're talking about, but certainly bigger ones than maybe some of our listeners, where they're probably going like, I'm a team of one or two or maybe three people, right? And like the amount we get done, if we could just add double our size, we get double the output. But what I
mm,
find is like when you increase that size, you start to build like friction comes in the way, and you don't actually get that multiplier effect because
yeah,
now because maybe it's tied to the specialization, maybe it's tied to communication, especially when you're international, right? You just got timing
yep,
things with communication and hours of the day. But that's
absolutely.
yeah,
Well, and you get all of these really weird builds. So, like, we ran into this where, like, because Intel was so massive, there would be a country team that's like, hey, we need to solve for X. And so they would buy their own SaaS, they would buy their own tool, they would, like,
yeah,
try to build something up that, like, our central HQ MOPS team, like, would have no idea even existed, right? And it's just kind of this shadow thing that exists. And so then every time that happens, which would happen all the time, then
yeah,
you'd have further and further fragmentation of the experience for customers, but also the data, like, reporting metrics, like and, some of these tools, like probably everyone would like to use, but like, can we all get on the same page? And it's hard when
yeah,
you're like dealing with literally hundreds to thousands of different stakeholders.
yeah.
Just
It's crazy.
like
I mean, I think that's for people who have not experienced and where they go like, oh, well, there's you people who work in big companies wouldn't be able to work in a startup, for example, or early
that.
stage company. I'm like, actually, I think you'd be surprised at how
Yeah.
much we could get done with actually fewer distractions and a little more autonomy and control, right?
Everyone I know who has left the giant company for a smaller company, even honestly going from Intel to Snowflake, which Snowflake is still big for a lot of probably your audience and just people in general. Like, it's 8,000 employees. To me, I'm like, oh, it's just so tiny, like it
Right.
just feels
Yeah.
so much more approachable, and just the speed at which I can actually get stuff done is amazing. I think a lot of people. It's like your point is really valid. There's that misperception that, like, okay, anyone who's at a big company can't get something done at a smaller company. That's true sometimes. There are people who outsource a lot to agencies, or they're not as like directly
Yeah.
tied into stuff. But there are unicorn people, I would say, that are able to operate at that level of complexity and hold that much chaos and still move stuff forward in spite of the organizational drag.
Yeah.
Then you put those people in an organization where there aren't those barriers, and like, holy moly, it's
Yeah.
cool.
Get out of the
So
way. Right. Yeah.
exactly.
I think for the people who have not experienced that, it's funny. As I was reading the intro for you, there was something in there that pinged, and this conversation did too. So I listened to a lot of other podcasts. One of them is Modern Wisdom. So Chris Williamson, people are familiar with it. And some of his recent episodes, he's been talking about this thing that he's been thinking about called unteachable lessons.
Mm,
And I think this is one of those things that kind of lives in that domain, right? Unless you've experienced that, right? And you go like, oh, how bad can it be at this big company? You don't have all these expectations and you don't have to move quickly, but like, it's a there's there's different challenges you have, right? And until
and
you've
it's
been
such
in it, you don't really know what it's like, right?
like, we literally would do like billions of dollars in revenue. Like, we have billions of dollars in actually marketing influenced revenue documented that we drove in like a quarter, a half, right? Like, it's just a different amount of pressure. Yeah, I would argue like it's a lot harder in some ways because you have to wrangle so many cats. Like, you
Yeah,
just have to herd so many different stakeholders, and it's really like I said earlier, you're working kind of in spite of
yeah,
the organizational bog down to keep things
yeah.
moving.
There's so many people who can veto something, right?
Exactly. And it's easy
Right.
to just be like, well, I guess we're not doing that. But I'm really proud of what the team did. Just like all the programs that we did, but especially this Tiger Team effort for sure.
Well, yeah, so let's like talk about the Tiger. Well, so for our listeners who may not know what a Tiger Team is, maybe spend a little time
Yeah.
just like, what does that mean? And then, yeah, you were asked to lead that and kind of
Yeah.
talk about what you were asked to build and what the mandate was.
Yeah, so Intel is massive, as we've established, massive, complex. In addition to that, I like to describe Intel as an ingredient brand, really. But what I mean by that is like most of the revenue is not being closed by us directly; it's being closed by our channel partners because
Oh
we are
yeah, okay.
selling chips that are going into devices, right? People aren't buying like a tangible thing directly from Intel; they're buying it in a laptop or a server or something else, some other device. So that makes the go-to-market motion really complex and really, as a friend of mine noted, not psychologically approachable, which is a really like, hilarious description.
Yeah,
But because of that, Intel had historically only done kind of like brand marketing. Like it was really just this awareness play that was air
yeah,
cover for the industry. But there were real opportunities for us to accelerate pipeline and differentiate and do more with like what we were bucketing as revenue marketing, but essentially demand and ABM, more full funnel approach. And there had been pilots for that over the years in different spaces at Intel, but there had never been organizational buy-in, no leadership buy-in. And so maybe one little team would stand something up and then it would fizzle out. And it would always suffer from the classic like lack of sales alignment or buy-in, right? So it'd be like
sure.
one really excited marketing team that's going to go build something and then like sales is like, what even is this? I have no interest in this. And it becomes extra complicated when we're dealing with like partner handoffs and, you know, looping in partners, because a lot of that, again, like when you get to that level, is going to a partner. So this Tiger team was like a cross-functional group of folks that were meant to rebuild our concept of demand gen and ABM marketing. Like what do we have? Like analyze what we've got in place. What should we be working towards? And we really focused that around three kind of areas. First was like the sales and marketing alignment, crucial upfront. Can't skip that part. So many teams still do, which is wild. But like, let's make sure we all agree on what good looks like. And then the tech stack, like what do we need in our tech stack to actually deliver on these things? And what data layers and APIs and connection points do we need to have? As well as kind of the process layer of that, right? So like once we figure this out, what are the planning processes supposed to look like? What, you know, who should own what? And like, what are the, you know, expectations between teams to keep things running. So it was, as Jess accurately described, not psychologically approachable, probably, but it was really cool. And we started with a mandate from our CMO and CRO. He called himself a CCO, but that's a whole different chief commercial
Yeah,
officer. But
yeah,
anyway, and so we had buy-in from them, and I think that was like the first most important thing, to have that top-down buy-in. We had folks from our Intel, again, massive organization. So we had HQ marketing, field marketing, so our country teams,
mm-hmm.
our partner marketing org, MOPS, RevOps, and sales, both HQ kind of sales planning, or like category as we called it, and the field sales folks. And we all started just like by getting in a room for 3 days to just kind of whiteboard, like, what is the ideal state if we built our field of dreams of like, what do we want the customer experience to look like? And the, you know, the impact that we want to have on revenue and working together. Started from there and then worked our way back to like, okay, well, what do we have currently that can help us get to that state, and where do we need to go? And this was all happening at the same time that we were in the middle of a massive overhaul of our MarTech stack. So we were moving from Eloqua to Marketo. We were introducing a CDP and 6sense. So we were trying to do it all at once. And so we kind of approached it in this crawl, walk, run phase where we identified where, you know, dream state. We knew that we were going to have the whole tech stack online in second half of 2025. And so we're like, okay, for the first half of 2025, let's start testing some of these processes between teams. Like how might we connect better on how we're delivering our campaigns and how we're connecting leads through to our sellers and all of that kind of stuff. What is possible within our existing infrastructure in Eloqua? And then how are we building towards our dream state? And our dream state included like robust propensity modeling and lots of fun stuff with intent. And so we started building that ideal state and also running pilots within the US and EMEA from like pretty much right away to see like, okay, well, if we turn on some of these demand gen campaigns, what can we do, and how do we actually live route this stuff? The other thing that was really interesting was that we did not have like an SDR function at all at
Okay.
Intel. So
Yeah.
we hired an agency to do like an SDR as a service kind of function for us
Mm-hmm.
as a part of this. So yeah, we were really looking at that end to end experience. And it was wild, but we kind of broke it down into digestible chunks. So we had the overall team, and then we had kind of subcommittees that were focused on really particular things. So the two big buckets that most of the subcommittees fell into were like mapping the sales and marketing journeys. So we sounds really obvious, but a lot of companies don't take time to do this. But if you have your buyer's journey, you have an idea of like how buyers are moving through, like
Yeah.
most marketing teams have that.
Major touch
And then
points
most,
along the way, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Right.
exactly, like what their needs are, what their jobs to be done are, all of that stuff. And then you have the sales journey of like, what cycles are they moving through, right? Like, and everyone's got a different process, but when do we take action that triggers the next stage in a sales cycle? And layering those two together just to be like, okay, well, where do they intersect? And where are we not actually delivering a very good experience or handoff process right now? And just doing that, like, and just kind of taking a Sharpie to those like junctions and being like, okay, well, this is way off because marketing is doing this and sales is doing this, and that's a weird experience for the customer. So how can we
Yeah.
tighten that? And then the click down on like, well, what tech do we need to have in place to explain, to like streamline some of those stages?
Sure. Can I ask a few questions?
Please,
One,
please.
because there was so reliant on partner channels, and I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if I assume these were either like resellers or mostly resellers, or I guess you were selling to manufacturers who then sold
We
their
had
products that had yours embedded in them. So it's,
bunch of different partner types. So it would
yeah.
be
Okay.
resellers, hardware manufacturers,
Okay.
integrators, different
So,
ISVs.
okay. Okay. So I've had one experience where I dealt with what I would call manufacturers reps. So people who were like salespeople for hire, right? And they didn't hold inventory. And then we had distributors who held inventory. So when you have your salespeople, were they like direct selling to end customers, or were they like managing partner accounts who actually like did the selling? Okay, so both. Okay, so another layer of complexity there that if people
Exactly.
haven't dealt with is hard to explain if they haven't gone through it. So
Yeah.
I want to go all the way back. So you described how two things. One, how important the sales and marketing alignment was. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
anybody's going to disagree with that, with this
Yeah.
kind of strategic thing. But then you described sound like a workshop, 3-day workshop where you brought a bunch of people together. Was that the place where you did the alignment, or was the alignment before that to go like, here's who the people are we're going to say are going to be part of this Tiger team who are going to go show up in this workshop
Yeah.
that
That's
are
a
like,
good question. Yeah. No, so we got that's true. I kind of skipped that step. So we had buy-in from our executive team like about a few weeks before that, over the holidays of like
sure,
2024. Got that buy-in, and they kind of voluntold, okay, these are the people
yeah,
that need to be part of this, right? And so yeah, and then we invited them all to a room together. And I will say it was pretty freaking cool. Just having been there for like 4.5 years, and then I had colleagues on that team that had been there for 25 plus years, and there was a real spirit of like collaboration and working together that folks had never felt previously. And I think it was just the magic of actually just putting like every idea together, and not like working towards the art of the possible together. A lot of
yeah,
these large organizations, just it's a mandate. Okay, well, marketing needs you to do this, or sales needs you to do this. Same between the relationship between marketing and ops, right? It can be said for any relationship between orgs, but there's magic when you can just kind of like step outside of your like take your hat off for a second and just kind of
yeah.
like imagine the art of the possible.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like I've been part of Tiger teams, both leading or participating in it too, or things that would have like could have been called a Tiger team. But
Mm-hmm.
I think getting that executive ownership is really, or support is important. What I've run into is, um, in one sense, I go to the executives and they're all nodding their heads. Yes, we support you. But then I go down into like, okay, we're pushing this change,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to, it's not landing or really getting
Mm-hmm.
integrated into the organization. And what I figured out is there's this gap between the executive leadership and what I would call the lieutenants, right? Boots on the ground, people who are going to
Mm-hmm.
have to deal with whatever changes. So I sort of shifted the way I approach these big things to where, like, yes, I still want the executive support. I have to have that, right? Budget, timeline, expectations. Um, but I always tell them, like, I want people who are going to be a part of this to help with key things, especially decision makings, priorities. I want those people to be two things at a minimum: respected within the organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially in whatever organization they're part of, so like sales. And second, I want them to be empowered to be decision makers.
Yeah, for
Because if
sure.
they're always having to go back, like, we would never get anywhere. And I think, did
Yeah.
you have that kind of expectation set, or how did you address
Yeah.
that?
Absolutely. Definitely. And I think the other really important part was like making them feel like they were empowered by the Tiger team, right? Like that when they went to take these ideas back to their broader team, that the rest of us were like cheering them on and that they were heroes too, right? Like we had bi-weekly executive updates on this Tiger team. So we would rotate who was sharing the updates, like really giving everybody
Oh,
visibility, getting to highlight like who got to like show the incredible amount of work because it was an insane amount of work. For sure.
yeah. Um, okay, one more question, and I'd like to get into some more nuts and bolts stuff. But
Yeah.
so one of the things I can imagine comes out of something like that is what you described, right? A lot of sort of aha moments from, like, oh, I didn't know this is what you did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, which is great. But also, I suspect there's a lot of people, if you have the right people in the room, they're going to be passionate about what they believe the right direction is to go, the right strategy, and not everyone's going to be on the same page. How did you reconcile that within the team to get alignment, even when? So the way I describe it, like, I really look for places that drive to consensus, and by that I mean, like, everyone's going to walk out of that and support whatever direction we're going.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, all the right people get a chance to really fight for their and advocate for their position strongly as they can.
Mm-hmm.
But as a group, then we go, like, collectively, we're going to all go support where we're going, even if it wasn't my preferred direction. Did
Yeah.
you run into that kind of stuff? How did you
Oh,
have a formal way
definitely.
of thinking about that?
Yeah, and I think it's this is going to sound so cheesy, but I swear this was like so clutch. Like the way that we opened up that like first initial meeting, like I had this very cheesy analogy about I'm sure you've heard of this parable. It's an Indian parable that's like blind or monks that are blindfolded and they're like touching one piece of an elephant and they're supposed to describe what the animal is. So there's one monk that like touches the foot and is like, oh, it's a cow. And there's another monk that touches the trunk and is like, it must be some kind of lizard, and like touches the tail and is like, oh, it's a snake, right? And there's all these different because like when you are only seeing one piece of something, you're convinced that that is your truth. And
Yes.
Intel is like this giant elephant, right? And we're all in these different parts and we tend to have these blinders on to like, just, well, this is my one piece and therefore that must be truth. And so it was really opening with that concept of like, we all need to kind of take the blindfold off, look at the entire elephant, and see, you know, what are we dealing with here? And I really encouraged folks consistently, not just in that one meeting, but to take off their official hats. Repeatedly, right? Like as we're looking through things, like what actually makes the most sense and how can we work towards that? And during the actual workshop, we really focused on, we did kind of a design sprint style session where we had an impact to effort matrix and we had people writing their ideas on sticky notes and we'd have time boxed things and we'd let people go and vote on the things. So it was democratized in a way that it was not like, oh, well, this is this person's idea and I don't like him, so I'm not going to vote for his idea, right? It was like everyone's ideas on a sticky note and then you would have time to go and kind of vote. And I think that opened it up to let people be more creative or have their voices heard, but that maybe they wouldn't normally feel like they could say something because their VP is also in the room and they don't want to
Right.
sound like they're trying to, but the way we ran that workshop, I think was really helpful. And then everyone was able to vote and everyone did feel pretty like we had a high level of alignment in the room by the end of those couple of days, just because of kind of that
I love
approach.
that.
Yeah.
I actually don't think that parable of the elephant thing is cheesy. I think it's funny. Another thing that you and I were talking about, you being in Portland and me being in Texas, like there's a lot of people who have perceptions about what those places are like, right?
Yeah.
Some are accurate, some are not. But like going through that exercise and thought process will hopefully force people to not only sort of try to open up the aperture to think about what they're looking at, not just from their own spot, but also to kind of go like, watch out for what are my preconceived notions about what that team does or what this process is or what's wrong, because that's easy to get trapped in that.
Absolutely. And it's relevant to like, some of the other things you were talking about too, with like the relationship between teams or between like campaign teams and MOPS teams or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like we all just kind of get set in that one view.
Yeah. Well, and I think this becomes especially true in large organizations for whatever reason. It's not unique to it, but there's this us versus them.
Yeah.
Right. There's that happens in
human nature, I think, at some point, but
yeah, I mean,
right. Like, easy to fall into.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's like, I forget, is it Dunbar's number? Like, have you heard this?
Yes, of like the max number of people
it's 150 in the range of 150, right? The number of people.
Yeah.
When you get into an organization that's tens of thousands of people, right? It would be surprising that kind of tribal effect didn't happen.
Yeah, for sure. 1000%. Yeah.
So, okay. So when we talked before, as you guys got into this, right, you got alignment, got figured out the gaps from what you had, what you needed. What were some of the things that surprised you as you dug into that like one of the things you said was like, you had systems that felt like they were really old. I think you said 2012-ish, right? So,
oh my gosh, Michael. Yeah. So like, much love to all of my former like MOPS colleagues at Intel. I heart you all. I'm not trying to like, if you're listening to this, I love you.
Throwing shade on you. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like I think even from the get-go when I joined the team, I had come from a much smaller org where I was like essentially all of marketing, right? With like a small team, and I was really hands on keyboard for everything. And then jumping into Intel was like bananas, right? Like just really perspective shifting. But we had a lot of stuff that was just kind of embarrassing. So like we didn't have any ability to capture UTMs on our .com. Like that just had been turned off at some point. And like there was just no ability. So we had like no tracking of like our sources from campaigns at all. And like at some point, like it goes back to like the complexity of this giant company. Intel.com had 1 million pages. Like that is bananas, right? And just pages? Like 1 million pages.
Those are the ones I knew about. I'm sure there was more than that. Yeah.
Oh, so much more. There were so many microsites, but it was a constant battle. And so like at some point IT was like, nope, like too much to try to manage all the metadata and all the things on all of these pages. We're turning it off for everybody. And so like that was one big challenge. And then, we didn't find out until like 2 months into this Tiger team that like, oh yeah, no, well, you can just submit a special form and get that turned back on. We're like, cool, love that. Like thanks. Would have been great to know that 4 years ago when we were, trying to get basic campaign tracking for some of our stuff. So that was like a really big one, but we also had a lot of broken data transfers. And I know this is something so many companies face, even if they're like modern and scrappy, but pretty much any time that we needed to move a contact from one place to another, it was happening in an Excel spreadsheet. Like there was just no actual transfer of data. And I think it was just like this kind of like the reason that it happened is just like you have this giant scale. I mentioned this earlier where you've got all these random people adding things to your stack. And so at some point it becomes just like all these like things that have been fixed with duct tape and barbed wire over the years, right? And it's very precariously built and it's like fine enough, but it's not actually working. And because, that type of like demand gen or lead gen was never prioritized for Intel. It was like, well, who cares that like, if we want a contact to go from the map to the CRM, like just, do that with a spreadsheet. And here's a Jira form you have to fill out. And it's going to take 3 weeks to get it moved over there, which is really awesome for your SLAs, right? So,
right. Yep.
So there was a lot of that kind of stuff that we really had to poke on that was painful of like, okay, really basic things. Like, can we just simply not have our contacts in an Excel spreadsheet? Like, events were a great example. And I think a lot of companies actually are still kind of in this boat with events, but like
Oh, for
we
sure.
would, have contacts from an event, and like I'd get it from the events team like 2 months later. They're like, oh, by the way, these are the people that badge scan. I'm like, cool, awesome, love that. Like I had one that was like a literal year later, and I was
I'm imagining like money
even
just being lit on fire there. But...
exactly. So that was another like pet project of mine, was like trying to connect.
You're not even getting into like, I had a conversation today with somebody who has been asked to do more support for sales-based campaigns, so commercial marketing, which means using the CDP for segmentation with data sourced from Salesforce. And this person didn't know Salesforce real well, so we kind of walked through how you would do it. And at the end, he asked me, well, if the sales team is going to this marketer and they're saying, go do this, generate this list, and today they can Excel and they get uploaded to the marketing automation platform. Can we do that? I said, well, yes, but here's what I suspect is happening, right? Salesperson goes, here's like, go to a sales ops person, generate a report, export that. It's getting shipped around to the sales team to say, yes, no, right? Oh, there's somebody's missing. If that's happening, we can't replicate it because there's no way to make that decision unless they're doing it in some sort of structured way. And I was like, I don't know about the sales process.
And then what happens when they put that in the map, and some of those contacts are already in the map, and then you have duplicate records and it's all a mess. And like that is yeah.
But like my point is like, for you now you've probably got multiple sales teams, multiple CRM systems. They use different processes. Right.
We had just Salesforce, but like, different campaigns within that, obviously, but very different audiences and different motions, right? So we were solving for this for our like CCG, which is like commercial client, like PC stuff, and also our data center offerings. And so it was messy. Plus the sellers at that point, which I feel like most people can relate to this, just never updated Salesforce ever, like at all. Like there was never data in there. But we had a lot of problems with like the even when we were starting to build some of the like automatic connections between the map and the CRM, we'd still have to go and manually clean stuff up because they're like, we'd have to dedupe a bunch of things. We'd have to enrich things. The wrong contact would be assigned to the wrong account. So it was a real mess.
Yeah. And I think like that's anybody who's dealing with that with a relatively small organization, right? It's not a multiplier effect. It's more of a logarithmic thing. It's like, it's really a challenge when you get that. Maybe we can shift gears a little bit because you kind of hinted at this. I think off and on here is, I think maybe you would even admit this, right? That you had a perception, maybe a misperception about ops, data, systems, all that coming into it, or others did who were part of that Tiger team. What do you think are the most common kinds of misperceptions from general marketing folks about what ops does?
I think like most general marketing folks, like I will say for myself, I am a huge fan of MOPS. I get nerdy about it. I love it. Like, I'm super involved with that side of things always. But a lot of marketers just don't even think about it. It's not even that they have a misperception. They just don't give it any thought at all. And I think that's a real problem because especially with the way marketing happens now, like it is so reliant on your tech stack. And so you can build like the most incredible strategy, but it will literally not work if you don't have the right tools in place. Yeah. And I think a lot of marketers need to understand the complexity of that and that it is not something that just happens overnight, right? Like if you want to do something completely different, ops needs time. And when they push back on you, they're not pushing back on you to be jerks. They're pushing back because if that is going to make a massive change to how they have things organized, they're, all the different things, whether it's like how their data flows are set up or like segmentation or any of that, that's like a massive change, right? And so you have to be really committed. I think a lot of marketers will also ask for things that are like one-off requests. And I would say vice versa, like at least I heard from our MOPS team frequently, like that marketers just don't even know what they're asking for. Like there's a perception that like they just have no idea. Like you don't need this, right? It's almost like a little bit of condescending. Like you don't
Yes,
need this. And I think there are, of course, marketers that do a lot of random acts of marketing that exists, right?
for sure.
But there's a lot of strategy too. And I think there are a lot of folks that are like, I think what MOPS could take from marketing is really understanding the why behind the asks of like, we want to do this because it's really critical to the customer experience at this point in the journey. And if we do that, it's going to help us move this right, like
Yeah.
other thing. And that's often missing in the asks, like kind of the understanding of why we're asking for it.
Yeah.
We're not giving you just like a random request to do this crazy thing. Like this is the reasoning and why it's going to be better for the customer.
So the pushback I think we would get from our audience who are in marketing ops would be like, I want to do that, but when I've tried, people said like, oh, we don't have time, we've got to go do it. So it feels like that conversation about understanding what that marketer's like their thought process, why they're trying stuff, should start happening sooner, so that when the
Yes.
request comes in, you've already built up a little bit of that. So
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, have you experienced that with any like across your different stops on your career where you've worked with ops teams that maybe demonstrated something like that, like trying to better understand how the marketing team worked, how the
Mm-hmm.
maybe like I know I've worked with like there was a role I interviewed for at one point where it would have led creative ops, and I didn't get it because I didn't have that. I was like, I have worked with creative teams
Mm-hmm.
probably more than any other, like maybe that and like demand gen type teams pretty equally because there's so much interconnection.
Totally.
But like I always wanted to understand how they were working, right?
Yeah. And I think that's like really the goal for or the advice for anyone who wants to have a better relationship there or like be more cross-functionally competent, have more of that ability to connect dots is like that curiosity mindset. Like really the just be curious and like zoom out and be curious of like where your role fits in the broad scheme of things. And that's going to be a superpower because that's what allows you to connect dots and move things forward. But yeah, I would say the Snowflake MOPS team is actually super good at that. It's a real culture of like being very tightly aligned. Our demand and particularly our ABM teams do some crazy cool stuff. Like they are very sophisticated in their approach. They do one to many, one to few, and one to one. And their one to one stuff is like insanely complex and long-term plays with tight alignment with our sales team. And they like MOPS is their like ride or die through all of that. So yeah, Brian.
So curious, how's that MOPS team maybe say no without saying no or push back when I request it? Like how do they approach that kind of conversation? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that.
I can't speak for them because I'm still so new, but like Brian would be a great person to have on your podcast, honestly, because they
Send them
do
our
some cool.
way.
Yes, I will. He's awesome. He was at Mopsapalooza if anyone else was there. But yeah, I don't know how they push back, but I mean, like in general, I will say about Snowflake all up, which has been such a delight, is that like every company has like a talent to ego ratio. And like some companies are high talent, high ego, like think Meta or AWS, or like there's other examples, Apple. And there's some companies that are low talent, high ego, right? Like I won't name some names that I've worked at, but like, there's some
Sure.
places like that. But Snowflake is very low ego, high talent, and that's how they hire. And it's like you feel that very much. So everyone's just very collaborative. And generally, like if you have a good POV and reason why you're asking for something, people are typically like supportive and at least of like, hey, let's give it a whirl and see what happens.
Yeah. So the reason I asked that question is because at one point you said there was this like you've seen some ops teams where they go like they have a condescending view of these other teams as if like, oh, they don't even know what they're asking for. And like I have a real visceral reaction to that because I see it too. And I think that at the same time, a lot of those same people, they go like, why am I not seen as a strategic partner? Well,
yeah,
if you're not trying to like, yes, should they understand more? Would you like it if they understand more about you? Like, but why don't you take the first step and go like, I want to understand how you work. And when you ask for this, like, I want to understand what you're going through and start building that early. Because then what I've found when I do that is when I push back or when I say, what if we did this instead? Or what if, like, have you thought about this? Like, they're much more receptive to that kind of conversation because they see that. And sometimes that means doing something you think may not be the best thing, but you're doing, you also like, I guess, is it, Amazon has the idea, like, if think of decisions, is it a door you're going through that you can come back from, or is it one you can't come back through? Right. So if it's something that's like on the first path, like, yes, you could do something, and if it goes wrong, like, it's not a big deal, right? Low risk. Like, why not just do it? Right. Build some credit, like invest in that relationship so that you can then have an opportunity. Because then they say, like, oh, this person does want to help, and when they're pushing back, it's because they have a valid reason.
Yeah, for sure. I think that is good advice for anyone, like not just mobs, but like campaign teams too. I have a friend who worked at Intel with me, and I remember telling her like how nerdy I get about the tech stack, and she's like, "Oh, I just can't even think about that stuff." And I was like, "That blows my mind." Like, you have to understand it at a fundamental level. Like, you don't have to be deep technically, like in the weeds with every single thing, but you at least need to understand it at a level that, like, how your idea of how you're building your campaign is going to be supported by your tech stack, and you're not asking for something that is literally impossible, right? Because especially at these big things, like when we're running campaigns at Intel, we're talking millions of dollars in multiple countries. And so you build something out and you just chuck it over the fence. You need to make sure it's viable, right? Before you just,
No, I think people probably get tired of me because I that's a soapbox I will continue to stand on, is that, like, don't start dissing these other teams, right? And you got to figure out, and then there's ways to, like, then you build some credibility and a chance to push back, but you need to do that even in a respectful way, right? There's ways to do that.
It also makes you better at your job, right? Like, the more you understand your other stakeholders, it makes you better at your job. I am a better product marketer because I talk to my sales teams all the time. I talk to product all the time. I talk to my demand and ABM people, and I understand what they need, and it makes my work better. And it's the same for any role.
Does it sometimes feels like those conversations are unproductive?
I mean, I think that's true for like a lot of human interaction, right?
No,
but I would say that, like, net, like, I get more out of it than like the downside. Like, of course, there's going to be times when it's unproductive. Of course, there's going to be times where product wants something from me that sales is on the complete opposite fence about. And, like, there's going to be some tension there. But, like, I have only ever seen positive things in my career from working collaboratively with other functions. Like, on the whole, of course, there are road bumps, but, like, on the whole, it's been extremely valuable to me.
No, it's just funny because the reason I asked that is I was in a couple of conversations today where I think on the surface people go, if their view is short term, like, it was unproductive. But I was having these conversations because some stuff was shifting around, and I was like, I wanted to let people know. I could have just not said anything and just changed behavior, but I was like, that's just not. I don't want that to be my reputation. And so I was willing to have a conversation, and it didn't have a particular specific goal in mind other than communicating some change and catching up. And for me, long term, I think it's going to pay off. Right? I believe that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, I won't, like, the takeaway from the Tiger Team story is not everything was kumbaya and amazing at all times. It was hard. Absolutely. We had a lot of times have to consistently, like, rally different teams to get things done, or there were delays, or there were, like, disagreements. But, like, you have to keep in mind that, like, 2 steps forward, 1 step back is still 1 step forward. So, like, there's going to be times when, it feels like, oh, this is annoying, or we're stalling, but you're still making progress overall. And that's how any real change happens. So, like, having just resilience to that, and, like, keeping your eye on the prize, not giving up the first sign of, of friction is important.
Yeah. Grit, right? Have some grit.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Yeah. So maybe let's wrap up there. Like, you kind of hinted at, like, what it sounds like you're pretty proud of the work you did, even if, like, maybe you didn't get all the way to the finish line. But, like, what did you take away from that as a lesson that you carry forward?
Oh man, I feel like so many things, Michael. It was so formative in a lot of ways. It was a crash course in, like, rallying all these different opinions around a common goal, and how to communicate like with executive teams, honestly, because every 2 weeks we had to give an executive update, right? And that's a muscle that it's something that, Jess Cow from Adobe talks about all the time, like how to like
Yep.
speak geek to the C-suite or whatever. But
Yep.
like it really is something you have to practice over and over and over of like, okay, what's the level of detail that you need to give? And like, how are you going to move things forward? And it's really easy to get pigeonholed on things. So like that was really helpful for me personally. But also I just think, I mean, it fundamentally changed how I see kind of the go-to-market motion end to end. Like, so I have a lot of strong opinions about the importance of overlaying those journey maps, and that works for partner marketing too, right? Like that should be your ground zero for literally everything, because
Mm-hmm.
then it just everything, falls into that, and you could really quickly identify how you should be working together. But I'm really proud of what everyone did. Intel had some massive organizational changes where they outsourced 90% of all of us right after that. So it wasn't actually like the work was not actually just kind of stalled. But I kept telling everyone, there was real value in the lessons that we learned in collaboration and how to like step outside of our comfort zone, and documenting a lot of these things, right? Like building these really complex models for propensity measurement or, lead handoff and stuff like that. Those are all transferable things that we've all taken, forward into our next roles. So yeah, it's full of lessons. It was a very intense effort.
Yeah. What is it like? Doing hard shit makes you stronger, right? So
Exactly.
lift heavy
Yeah,
weights, run longer, right? Run harder.
exactly.
This
Yeah.
is the same kind of thing, more from a
Yeah.
career standpoint. Well, thanks for sharing, Rachel. This has been a lot of
Yeah.
fun. Enjoyed our conversation from
Me
before we
too.
started recording till now. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Thanks for
so
having
yeah, appreciate that. Thanks. If folks want to continue the conversation or keep up with what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn is awesome. So just Rachel Roundy, connected to Michael, so you can find me easily.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you. As always, thanks to our listeners and our longtime supporters. We always appreciate it. If you have ideas for guests or topics or want to be a guest, you can reach out to Mike, Naomi, or me. So, Rachel, you're going to make an introduction, I think, already. So, uh,
Yes, definitely.
we will always do that. We'll get happy to get the ball rolling. So, until next time, bye, everybody.
Bye.